Good evening and good afternoon, and welcome to Frecuencias, bajas, charlas musicales, episode 131. We are very happy to be here tonight with our English edition and one new episode as we start in May 2020 with David talking about music and brass instruments and spreading episode to episode and of course trying to bring you interesting guests as we have today, and of course also interesting topics about not just brass but also about music. And we are very happy to have him, Andrew Cattanach, that we are going to introduce in a few minutes. And we was, of course, talking off camera about a lot of things that Andrew will need to repeat again for you, but it is going to be a very special episode. So let me introduce our co-conductor, who is since May 2020 sitting on the other side in Washington, D.C., my friend David Lopez.
Yes, thank you very much, Patricia. And I was thinking, like, it's incredible what technology can afford us right now. You're somewhere in Germany, Andrew is in England, I'm here in the US, and we can do this like we are sitting in our living room. Each of us has the drink of choice, and we have a very good conversation. I was telling Andrew off camera that I wish we were recording from the very beginning when I entered the conversation, because it's been interesting from the very beginning, and that's what we have in store for us today. It's a very interesting conversation. Before I got in the call, I posted on Instagram in Spanish, like, hey, come here to both practice your English through a very fun topic, you know. So in Frecuencias, we like to talk about the educational opportunity that this space has afforded us. I personally have met a lot of interesting people thanks to technology, thanks to Patricio from my basement right now. And so with that in mind, like, we are for a very good time, and I'm very excited to be here, and we're very excited to have Andrew. Patricio, if you want, like, go ahead and introduce our guest today, and let's kick the conversation, man, because 50 minutes is going to be like so short for everything he has to tell us.
Maybe not.
Exactly. So let me introduce Andrew Cattanach. Is right now B-flat tuba player, if I may say so, Andy, of the famous Fodens Band, who have privilege to listen on the Europeans this year in Birmingham in the general rehearsal, which was for me very special, and of course on the performance they have done on the competition. He is also a former tuba player from one of my favorite brass band, Brickhouse and Rustic, and it's for us a huge privilege to have him here. And we're going to try to develop all brass band secrets of the world. So Andy, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So it is fantastic to have you here, and well, I will describe myself as a late fan of the brass band movement, but even though a very, enthusiastic and passionate fan of this movement, which we was talking off the camera, that not many people knows about what's really happening in the UK about the brass band. And the first thing I would like to ask you, because you have also orchestral experience, is if you compare what you are playing in orchestra and what you play in your regular season in brass band, how will you describe these two different experiences?
Well, it's a lot busier in the brass band parts. Brass band music, you very, very rarely get a rest. You're playing for most of the performance or the rehearsal time. It's on your face. Orchestral work, for me, it's always been very enjoyable because I only do bits of it, and it's usually big things. So for me, it's quite exciting to do orchestral work. But the change between brass band and orchestral stuff, all the counting, having full movements where you're not even playing and things like that, is a big, for a brass band player, it's a big switch. It's a different kind of, it's almost more stressful to me to not be playing than to be playing. So I'm happier playing all the time. You can't get lost if you're playing. So it's it's a very different discipline. But I think physically, the brass band playing is you need a lot more sort of physical playing, because it's just on your face for 2 hours at a time, or contest weeks, you know, every night, and it's just a lot more blowing of the instrument. Whereas orchestral work, you've got to be perhaps even sharper mind-wise to know when to come in and to just play that one note or that one passage and then switch off again, but still keep your eye on the ball. So I think it's two very different disciplines and different approaches to playing the instrument as well, I think.
Oh, that's great. So if I don't understand wrong, the contrabass tuba, what you are playing in the brass band, is not being used in the orchestras in the UK because the orchestra play with C tuba, right?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of people who do have a B flat in the UK orchestras, only a couple. But yeah, generally play E flats as often as they can, and C's if they need something bigger, or the conductor wants something bigger, or whatever. But yeah, there's not many B flats. I think there are a couple of pros who do play a B flat now and then, but no, it is usually in this country or in the UK, it's E flat and C.
Okay. Yeah,
so
that's
I know
exactly.
where you are in Germany. There's a lot of B flat, isn't there?
Yeah, well, Sherman is B flat as a contrabass tuba and F as a F tuba, as a bass tuba, you know.
Yeah.
But I would like to ask our audience after this show that they go and listen to Fodens Band. Why? Because I would like, Andy, to ask you that you tell us what is your shop on the day, and then what is the time that you dedicate to the music besides your 8 hours shop.
Yeah, well, generally in the UK, all people in bands have normal jobs. Some are in music, some are teachers, some work for music services, some are school teachers of music. Myself, I'm an IT manager in a school and a sixth form college, and I've been at that school for 30 years. I started there as a science technician, actually, but I've never had a job that's music. I do a bit of teaching, and I do tutoring for youth bands and things like that. But no, my main job is working in a school in the IT department.
And about the time, how many days do you rehearse with the band? And
well,
how is
I thought you were going to ask this. I did think you were going to ask this. So I went through our 2022 calendar. So
that's great. Thank you very much for that.
I'm so excited about this.
Oh, don't be excited. So this year, Fodens Band, just the Fodens, we've had 90 rehearsals, we've had 20 concerts, we've done 6 contests, and we've done 8 days of recording. And in that is we've had 7 nights away from home, included in that. So either at contests or abroad, or a night away for a concert or something like that.
So I'm imagining that your peer bands, that other bands like have kind of the same schedule. So
yeah, I believe there's probably 2 or 3 that may even be busier than that.
Busier.
Yeah. Or there's certainly bands that have been busier than that. I don't know if they are at the minute, but I think there's probably 5 or 6 other bands that are around that sort of level of commitment.
Yeah, very nice. So, this leads me to our next question, and it's something that I'm very, very interested on. Like, okay, so all of you have other jobs, some of them related to music, but then with this schedule, this seems to be like like a job too. Like it's on itself like a job, and a very structured job with rehearsals and competitions. Like it sounds to me like a professional band in its core. So my question is like, how do you manage your time, because I mean there is family time, there is off time that you would like to take. So is this being part of the band, like, does it become a little bit of a burden for you guys, or how do you manage to keep that busy schedule without getting burned out, for
Well,
example?
sometimes it is a bit of a burden. I don't think anyone in any band would say that there aren't times where it is a burden or a bit too much. But then other times when you're not doing it, you miss it. And I think it's not just the top bands. I think even the local bands and the bands lower down the sections, most of those have 2 rehearsals a week, every single week.
Wow.
And even, you know, 4th, 3rd section bands, there are some that only have 1 rehearsal a week, but many bands have 2 rehearsals a week, no matter what section you're in, what standard you're playing at. And they'll all have fairly busy concerts or events to play at as well. So I think that part of the problem with the better bands is that you have to travel to get to them. So
Okay.
we've got a 2-hour rehearsal, but I'll also travel over 2 hours on that rehearsal night. So I'm sat in the car longer than I'm actually playing the rehearsal. And not just myself, there's people in our band from all over England, more or less. There's a lot of people coming from south of Birmingham up to Sandbach, and there's someone who comes from further north. I share travel with someone from near Lancaster. So there's a lot of travelling as well. So it's as much the travelling as the actual time at the band that takes the toll.
So now, like, you've been talking about local bands and other types of bands that are kind of in divisions and all of that. I would like for you to explain to us and our audience, like, that give us a little bit of an insight on the tradition of brass bands in England. Many of us, that like the first contact that I had with brass bands was the movie Brass Stove, and it's still an icon for the brass band world.
Yeah.
But I would like to hear from you, like being from England and living that tradition from early on, like how does one start in brass bands, like how's growing up with brass bands around, and then once you get into brass band playing an instrument. You told me that your daughter is learning the trombone right now, and your wife also plays euphonium. Man, it's incredible what you can learn in 15 minutes before entering this conversation. But all of that is very interesting for you to explain to us, like how is it growing up in that tradition, and once you start playing your instrument, like what are the steps to get to Fodens, to get to Brick House, and to compete at the highest level you can think of in the brass band world?
Well, I think now it's probably slightly different. I started 35 years ago, but at the time then, music lessons were free in school. So if you wanted to learn an instrument, whether it be a brass instrument or a violin or a woodwind instrument, you just went along and said, can I have lessons? So I actually asked in primary school, so when I was probably 9, something like that, 8 or 9, if I could learn the trumpet, but they'd run out of instruments, so I couldn't. So and I don't know why at that time I asked. I can't remember being interested. I'd never heard a brass band or anything like that, But then when I got to high school, I had another do, and I started learning the trumpet. And as soon as you start learning in school, the school has a band. It was a wind band in our case, and an orchestra. But just down the road where I had my lessons, they had a little sort of, they called it the regional music school. So it was like the town I grew up in Blackburn, the music school had a little brass band, and across the road they had a little orchestra that my sister played in. And so within weeks of being given a trumpet, I was sat in a brass band, learning, just playing the notes that you could recognise. And surrounded by other people. Some have been playing a few years, who were quite good. There was complete beginners like myself. Then after about a year, obviously, there's always a shortage of tubas. I was quite a big lad. Would you like to do on the tuba? So I took the tuba then. But by then, as soon as I got a tuba, the little brass band I was playing in after school was going quite well. So then the next step for me was the county band. So where I live in Lancashire at the time, there was the Lancashire Youth training band and the Lancashire Youth Brass Band. So the training band was for lower level, and I joined that when I was about 14. And but the town where I lived, Blackburn, had a band as well, a brass band, and they had 3 bands. They had a junior band, and they had an intermediate band in the middle. Then they had a top section band as well, which is still a top section band now, Blackburn with Down Band. And so it's the same people connected with all these. My music teacher at school was also in the Blackburn with Darwen band, and my brass teacher at school ran the regional music school band. And so then all of a sudden you're in Lancashire Youth Band, and people in Lancashire Youth Band played with Blackburn and Darwen or Freckleton or Longridge bands, all town bands near me. And you just start weaving your way through bands, local bands. Like even now where I live in a town called Penwitham near Preston, probably within 10 miles of my house, there's probably 5 brass bands of different standards. 10, 15 miles maybe. You know, there's the Leyland Band, who Patricio will know. Leyland Band
Yes.
are literally 3 miles down the road. And then Lostock Hall Band are just 3 miles a slightly different way. Longridge Band are 10 miles across the town. Freckleton Band are 10 miles away. So there's 3 first top section bands within 15 miles of my house. So that's as much luck as anything else. But once you play with one, especially on a tuba or a soprano cornet or something like that that's a bit exclusive, everyone knows about you, and so you get more playing opportunities, and it's just easy to get better just by playing in bands, you know. And that's a path that many people take in the band world, and I think it happens quite a lot now. The only difference now is there isn't any free lessons at school, so the pool of players has diminished because there isn't as many people taking it up, because there isn't free lessons, you've got to pay for them. So there are a lot of local bands, like my daughter's in 2 youth bands locally, Freckleton and Blackburn and Darwen, and they're both, you pay a small fee, but there's an instrument if you need it. It's, you know, it's good experience to go and learn. So the traditions are still going. They're not perhaps as big as they were.
Okay.
But it's still there. There's still local bands who are desperate for players, and if you go to a local brass band, they'll very often provide you with an instrument and provide you with lessons for no money or small amount of money, and you get your 2 rehearsals a week, and you know, you get a chance to go and play local concerts and things. So it is a good tradition over here. It's certainly not as big as it used to be, even 50 years ago. But it's still quite thriving, I'd say.
Now, so I imagine you start like in your regional band, as you described, and then you start climbing up as you get a little bit more popular and get more experience. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm imagining that you're playing a set of repertoire that repeats, or
Yeah.
at least it's standard. So you start knowing the pieces.
Yeah, in that way, it's very much like the orchestral world. You know, there's the orchestral standards that every orchestra plays every season because the audiences want them. You know, there's a lot of band music that's like that every band will have played or does play, and so that helps because you know a bit of what's coming up on any band's program. But the bands over here and in other countries as well are set up in divisions, leagues. And ours in the UK mirrors exactly the UK football league. So there's a championship, which is like the Premiership. There's the first section, which is like the Championship football, and then there's second, third, fourth section, and all those sections compete at area level. So it's bigger than counties. Ours is the northwest area, which is Cheshire, Lancashire, bit of Cumbria. And they compete on one day at the area contest, and then that's what provides the bands that go through to the national finals. So the national finals, there's a top section, then there's the 4 other sections, and there's bands from all over the UK competing against each other at all those different levels. So all the 4th section bands compete against each other, and you have a champion 4th section band, and they then get promoted if they win. And you know, bands move up and down just like football teams or whatever teams anywhere else.
So what you are saying? Sorry.
I've been remiss. I'd be remiss if I don't ask you this, but what's your football team in England?
Well, I was born in Blackburn, so it's Blackburn Rovers.
Okay.
But I'm not a massive football follower.
Okay.
Whereas my wife Alison and my daughter are season ticket holders at Blackburn Rovers.
Oh, okay. So they go to the stadium.
They go, yeah, they go every time. In fact, I take them and sit in the car outside and wait for them. So I do go and watch now and then, but not very often. But yeah,
Okay.
Blackburn Rovers. I live in Preston, though, and
You know why,
rival
David?
at Preston North End, so much of it.
You know why David asked? Because David
Manchester
looks
United.
every week, every game from the England League. That is crazy. Every game.
Whenever I have the time, though. But yeah.
Who's your English team then?
So right now, like I grew up like watching the Premier League with the Colombian players that were there at some point,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, but right now, like Liverpool is the team that stole my heart like 4 years ago, and I haven't I play FIFA in the Xbox, and so that's my team too. So, but yeah, I just love good football, you know.
Yeah.
And so the English league, the Premier League, is very entertaining. That's why I asked you. But back to business. I'm sorry for this.
No. That is part of the business too. Life is life. Yeah. So 2 questions who trigger what you were saying. The first is, you were saying the scene is not the same as 50 years ago. How was the scene 50 years ago? I mean, if now it's like this.
Obviously, I wasn't quite around 50 years ago, but there was certainly more bands. There was definitely a lot more.
Sorry, Andy, it is a record. How many bands do you have in the UK now?
I don't think anyone really knows, because the only way of counting is by generally seeing who turns up at the area contest every year. But a lot of bands don't enter the area contest, especially in the lower divisions. If they have a test piece that for some reason they don't like, they just won't enter. So I don't think there's an absolute definite. We've got this. I think there's over 1,000 bands in the UK, but the last count at the areas, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I just don't know. But then there's lots of bands who've never been a contesting band, so there's probably no official record of them. They exist and they play, but they've never turned up at a contest, or they haven't turned up at a contest for 10 years. So there's no way of really looking up, do they exist, if you know. So I wouldn't be able to tell you how many bands there are exactly.
It's fine. If I was just curious, you know, because probably they have had, you know, accounting, you know.
Yeah.
The second question is, when I listen you speaking about what you do for the music every year, and I have the chance to listen you playing Fodens, I kind of, as a professional player and also a pedagogue who works with young students, I kind of see an amazing passion that you are disclosing every year for making music that I kind of missing in my own students. I mean, have this same burning for music. I always say, who people who do it as a hobby, I say I will never do that. Have a shop 8 hours and they make. That's why I combine with this. Yeah. And you know, it is my shop, but it is every day. It is a lot of fun, and I love to practice and playing and performance. But I am missing this what you have. I mean, what all the movement in England have, and I think that is first admirable to see how crazy this is. I mean, it is, for me, it is difficult to understand, but at the same time, in the music world outside from the UK, I really have I am missing this kind of passion for music. Why you do that, if I may ask you?
I don't know. I think I think for a lot of us, the competition element is quite a draw. But it's for myself, you know, but anyone who plays in a top band in the UK you get opportunities to play at Symphony Hall, at the Royal Albert Hall, at all these great concert halls that a lot of people can only dream of playing in. You know, even professionals don't play in some of the venues we get to play in. So there's that.
I have never. Well, for example.
Yeah, but you know, there's a lot of concert halls in Germany I've never played in.
Oh yeah.
But so there's that. I think the challenge of the music, especially on tuba, compared to what else you could play on tuba, is a big draw. And the camaraderie of being in a group, any musical group, as you know, whether it be a choir or a wind band or an orchestra, but brass bands especially, they're relatively small, 25 players plus percussion. So there's usually no more than 30 people. So everybody knows each other. There isn't many little disparate groups. It's not like the violas stand over there and the trumpets are over there, and it's everyone's mucks in. It's just once you've done it for a little while as well, it's very hard to stop, because
nice.
You're always after the next thing. There's always something just round the corner. For us, for Fodens especially, and other top bands, there's always something different just round the corner. So
but, yeah,
it keeps you going. Like, for instance, at the minute we're quite busy coming up to Christmas, as every brass band is busy at Christmas. But last weekend we did 2 concerts with Matt Ford, a big band singer. So all the set was arranged by John Barber from our band, trombone player. It's all big band, Frank Sinatra numbers, Michael Bublé numbers with singer. But then this weekend we've got a concert with a choir, it's a very traditional concert with a choir. Then we've got a concert on our own on Sunday. Then we've got a concert with a school on Tuesday. And then the weekend before Christmas, we do 4 or 5 performances of The Snowman to film, where we play the music to a cinema showing of The Snowman. So we're very busy, but no 2 concerts are the same. Everything's slightly different. A lot of bands do go around and just play the same program week after week, and a lot of audiences like that as well. And that's their way of doing things. But we seem to be very varied in what we play.
Well, let me see 2 things before the bit starts. The first is I think how beautiful it is to have involved the whole family doing that, because it's great. I cannot imagine a better feeling than my wife playing euphonium and my daughter playing trombone, and understanding what we are doing, and kind of part of the music is kind of going through the family. That's the first thing.
And I think it helps that my wife understands. She's been in brass. She started in brass bands at, I think, age 8 or 9 or something like that. So she's grown up with the 2 rehearsals a week. Yeah. And she went to college to do band music under David King, and so she knows what it's like. Sometimes it still gets a bit too much, but equally she's out at rehearsals every week and doing concerts, and I'm out doing rehearsals and concerts. So there's that understanding that we work things out and round each other. Obviously I'm a little bit busier than her at the moment, but I think people who maybe have partners or spouses who aren't in brass bands or have never been in music, they struggle sometimes explaining away the amount of time we're doing things, the amount of times we're out of the house or not available or not there to do the shopping or the family stuff or visiting, So there is a pull on your time a lot, but.
And the second thing is I got the opportunity to be in Birmingham this year for the Europeans, and what I saw on the bar close to the auditorium were all band players mixed in the same bar drinking together. That was for me absolutely mind-blowing, because until there I was having this picture competition and each band for each other, but it's not like that. No. You get all in this bar and drink all together, and each other, and that is beautiful.
Well, there's so many of us have played in a lot of different bands. And so, you know, and I think there are a few people who've only ever had one band or a couple of bands, but a lot of people move around, you know, for jobs or life or just a change. So
Life.
yeah, and so you do know a lot of people, you know, and it is, at the end of the day, it is just a load of musicians hanging out together. You know, it is fierce competition, but equally, it's quite a social thing, and everyone really gets on, to be honest.
But you know what? One thing what we have here in different episodes around the road since 2020 was the topic about competition in music is not healthy. And we don't need to compete with music, you know, but when I see what is happening, the brass bands in the UK is for me actually, if I may say, and that is my personal opinion, is kind of a very nice balance what we can do with these competitions and, you know, getting community coming closer and families coming closer. I mean, and everything around music, what is better than that?
I think the competition is the reason that brass bands in the UK are at the standard they're at, I think, really. Some people would disagree. But I think if we didn't have to play those test pieces, even in the lower sections, if they didn't have a set, you have to play this for this competition, then that's what nudges standards up. So I think it's a good thing. I equally agree that sometimes it's a terrible thing because you can't judge, especially when you get, you know, one judge puts you first, one judge puts you fifth. It's like, well, how can there be such a difference, you know? Because that's what music is, isn't it? It strikes different people in different ways, and the same performance can hit people in very different ways. And that's when you think, oh, maybe this isn't a great idea. But generally, I think it's a good thing for brass bands because it just keeps the standard going.
Yeah, so when I hear you describing like the rehearsals, the kinds of concerts you do, I'm like, man, I wish I was there. Like it kind of it wakes in me like that passion that makes me remember why we enter in music in the first place. We have talked here in previous sessions that sometimes you're so busy chasing that rabbit that you forget why you're making music. And whenever you talk about different kinds of concerts, playing with family and all that support system that is built around brass bands, it reminds me what really is about, like music. And this might sound cheesy, but it's about coming together and making something meaningful. And as Patricio said, like whenever you see your wife and your daughter like learning music as well and keeping on the tradition, like it's something very beautiful. And so I would like to ask you, like from a point of view of an outsider like me, like that you walk us through, like how does a brass band function in terms of like how it keeps alive, like how financially, and then I would like to hear like the point of view of the instrument player that sits down in a section and is surrounded by music. So first, like that you describe how brass bands work in terms of administration and all of that, and second, like how is it to play inside one of those bands? And you were talking a little bit about concepts of sound you had, and that's something I would like to hear from you, given your experience.
Well, the administration of band, it depends on the level of your band. So lower down the divisions, they'll have will have a subscription, so players pay a few pounds a week to keep the band going, and then they'll do engagements where they'll either get donations or they'll charge a small fee, or some bands still have a sponsorship. And strangely, there's quite a lot of lower section bands do have sponsorships with very local people or local companies. We do a lot of concerts. We're run, I'd say, pretty well by the management of our band. We have a band manager, Mark Wilkinson, who's also the principal cornet, who does an excellent job. And we get we apply for grants, we get Arts Council money for projects, we do engagements, concerts. If you're lucky enough to win a contest, you just don't make a big loss. If you don't win the contest, you make a massive loss. Contests do not pay money. You know, the prize money at the big contests doesn't even usually cover the coach for the weekend, let alone the hotel or the musicians' petrol expenses or the conductor's fees or anything like that. So contesting is a loss-making thing. So we have to try and make money by doing concerts, doing grant applications and stuff like that. And I think most bands are the same now. I don't think there's many bands who can survive purely on concert revenue. I think there's always an input of grants or a bit of sponsorship or different ways of doing things like that. It's certainly not like the old days where, you know, it was a works band. Fodens was a motorworks band. So it was sponsored by a factory, Fodens Motorworks. Black Dyke Mills was the Mills band. Granthorpe Collier was the Colliery band. And the players worked at the company, and the company paid for everything. And, you know, it was a lot richer society in banding then. Whereas now, every band is hand to mouth. Every band is not struggling for money, but they're having to work a lot harder for money or look at different avenues for getting financing. Definitely.
No, okay. And then that's it. Yeah, go ahead, Patricio, go ahead.
No, I just, because we are in the financial part, I would like to ask Andy, who gets paid in the band? If some positions are special and you need, you know, professional support or people who have studies also if the conductor gets paid. The
conductor almost always gets paid right through the sections, right down to the fourth section. The conductor will probably get paid. In very top bands, some principal players will get a small retainer. So they'll get I don't know how much, I certainly don't get one. But so the
why always tuba players?
Well, some tuba players do, but so principal cornet, principal euphonium, principal trombone, solo horn, they might get a small amount of money, but it's not much, you know. I don't think any band pays a lot of money, but general people in the band, normal people, we might get some petrol expenses, some money towards your travelling expenses. I know we all get travelling expenses, but it doesn't cover the cost of the diesel. It's a contribution towards the diesel. Every rehearsal I go to costs me £5 in diesel after the band have given me my, you know. So if you think we did 90 rehearsals last year, every one of those cost me £5. So, but it's still a cheap hobby. You know, it's still cheaper than going playing golf, for example. You know,
absolutely. You put in perspective what you like to do, and then you invest on it. You know. So,
yeah. And if we move a little bit on a technical side, I mean, you are a B flat tuba player.
Yeah.
That you play English B flat 3 here on the 4th year, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So for our specific audience as a tuba players, what will you say that is your preparation as a B-flat tuba player who are preparing for a contest and need to achieve this special pushing sound from a brass band who is everywhere but is no aggressive? What is your...
So yeah, Andy, that's very related to my second question. Like, what's your concept of sound? How do you prepare for it?
Yeah, I think every band's slightly different, and every bass section is slightly different. But the actual preparation, so if you're talking practice, like home practice or anything like that, I don't do much of that at all, because we play so often. And I get to band a little bit early. And if there's a passage I technically need to get my fingers around, I will do that at band, or a bit of quiet practice at home, something like that, with a muting or anything like that. I know there are players who practice religiously hour after hour every day, and some of those have a lot harder parts than I have, so that's fine. But I think the main thing about preparing a contest piece in a band for us as a bass section is getting the balance right. And I think there are quite a lot of bands who have a slightly harsher sound than us, maybe. But I find that if we can keep the B flats louder than the E flats all the time, and I don't really mean that. What I mean is if we can keep the E flats quieter than the B flats and get that balance and play nimble and very tight, it sounds twice as big as the effort we're putting in. Whereas a lot of bands will just put a lot of effort in and perhaps not be as accurate, so it doesn't actually click. So the bass section at the moment, we do put a lot of effort in, obviously, but we never blow loud above what's comfortable, what's nice. And if that means that somebody in the section has to take it back a bit, then that's what we do, rather than get everyone else to play louder. And the balance of it then makes it sound twice as big.
Man, I wish like many young players were listening to this right now, what you just said, because whenever you're young, you think like the idea of the tuba is just blow your brains out and go all out. But what you're saying is like you never blow beyond what you're comfortable with, and that combined with accuracy and being together.
Yeah, just if you ultra together, if you're as together as you can be, and you're in tune, and nobody's playing with edge, it sounds huge. And then the rest of the band sits on top of that, and as long as the band doesn't, if the top of the band's blowing too loud, then it destroys the balance and it sounds harsh. But if you can keep, our resident conductor, musical director Michael Fowles, he always says pyramid of sound, basses up to cornets, and that's what we've tried to do. Especially that's what I especially have tried to do, and part of that is because I can't physically blow as loud as a lot of other players, and so people have to come down to keep the balance. But I think it sounds a lot nicer, for in my opinion anyway. Not other bands do things different ways, and they're successful as well.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the way we try and approach it.
But I agree, it sounds great. And in terms of section, you have tell us you don't practice a lot because you have 2 rehearsals per week, a shop, family, and probably it's not much time to practice. But you repeat in the rehearsals every time a lot. So in terms of section, do you do any special work together, or if you, for example, I ask because if you change a player and someone is new sitting there, do you need to kind of, it's like a new football player who is coming to the team, We're
doing that exactly as you speak. We are doing that now. Our E-flat player who has been with us for 4 or 5 years, Ian McKnight, he relocated for work. He now lives further south down the country, in Northampton. And so he's had to leave the band, and we're auditioning now for new players. So we've got a few people coming down and sitting in, but there's the only time the bass section does anything on its own is before contests. Every section in the band will have a sectional that's just them. So the cornets on their own, the horns on their own, the basses on their own. Only an hour or so, an hour and a half, something like that, just to nail particular bits of your test piece for that contest. But besides that, it's just in rehearsals, constantly listening and just chatting and just nudging and just, generally it works, luckily. And I think that's about getting the right people, not necessarily the best superstar player, someone you can get along with, who's going to fit into the blend of the section, not stick out, not be a prima donna, not, we just want a nice
teamwork.
Yes. Yeah, someone who's going to fit into the team, not try and, blow too loud, or, we just need someone who's just going to fit in nicely. And we will do. There's been many people who've come down for a blow who'd be great, and it's just about using your head rather than your body. There's a lot, you see a lot of performances with bass players leaning forward and thrutching around. And it doesn't actually sound any better at the end of the day. It might look better, it might look effective, you know, it might, but actually, have you ever seen Mel Lewis play the drums?
No, I have not.
It's worth looking at. Mel Lewis play drums.
Okay.
And he doesn't move. He plays drums all over the place, fast, brilliant. Oh, you know, he's from a while ago, big band drummer. But there's nothing else going on. There's no, you know, everything's just calm. No matter what's happening musically, it's calm. And I think that's, especially as bass players, if you can play like that, you need the physical, get the air in and out, but conserve all the rest of the energy for just getting the air in and out and getting the sound through the instrument and being accurate. Because the louder you play, the less accurate you become.
Man, this is awesome. Who would have thought? The music speaking for itself, you know?
Yeah, just be clean. If you're clean, if the band is clean, it sounds massive.
Yeah, I love that concept. Now, could you describe to us what preparing for a competition looks like?
Well, for us and for a lot of, it's different for every band, obviously, but some bands have one conductor all the time. So Black Dyke have Nick Childs all the time, Corey have Philip Harper all the time. So their preparation will be different to ours. We have a musical director called Mike Fowles who does most of our work, concert work, preparation, rehearsals, does some of the contest work. And he's very good at preparing a brass band, excellent conductor. So he'll do some work on the test piece, and then usually a week before the contest, we have a professional conductor who comes in, and that's currently Russell Gray. So we'll do some rehearsals on the test piece. Then the week before, usually on the Sunday or the Saturday, like the contest, the Saturday after, Russell will come in, and we'll usually do sectionals on a Saturday. We'll do a Sunday night rehearsal, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and so we'll have 5 rehearsals that week with Russell. And luckily for us, because Mike's excellent at preparing the band, Russell's job is to come in and put the icing on the cake and do the very musical things. Mike always says he prepares the band black and white, just what's on the page, and then Russell comes in and shapes it. And that's worked really well over the last 3-4 years for us. Whereas other bands will do it in a less, they'll have a bit more time because they've got the conductor there all the time. So they might not be quite as intense. I think a lot of the bands are still very intense with the conductor, but they don't have that swap over the week before where a different conductor comes in to take it on. But for us, we do that, and I think it works quite well at the minute. So that's how we prepare.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So in terms of how can you tell us about, as a player, do you have any further wishes that you want to change bands, or you want to, achieve other goals?
Yeah,
or
I do.
Okay.
I've never won the British Open.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I would like to win that before I retire. Yeah. So that is a bit of a goal for me, really, which is purely selfish. It's not a band goal. It's just, I'd like to win an Open before I finish playing. But no, I think no, it's not for people like me to decide things like that. I just turn up and play. I'd like there to be a few more. I don't know. It's rose-tinted glasses would say. I wish it was like when I was growing up, when I was younger, when there was free lessons and literally anyone could take an instrument up, whether that be brass or not. But those days have gone now, and I think we're missing a big pool of players in the UK that could be great players that never even get the chance to pick up an instrument. So I think that is, I would never have learnt an instrument if it wasn't free. Not because my parents wouldn't have paid or anything like that, but I would never even have thought of asking to have a try on an instrument if it wasn't free. And I think a lot of people my age are exactly the same. They would just never have picked an instrument up. So that is a big worry for me, and it has been a worry in the band movement for quite a while, that there isn't perhaps the number of people coming through purely because of that. So that's something that politically, if that could change, that'd be great. But I can't see that coming.
If someone, our audience who is mostly from Latin America, wanted to visit the band and listen some rehearsals, is this possible? If some of them are in the UK and listen to you talking with us and say, I would love to go to a Fodens rehearsal.
Yeah, most bands would welcome anyone down to listen. We very often have people down to listen to rehearsals, especially before contests. But generally, week to week, anyone can come and have a sit in the band room and listen. I know many other bands are the same. Yeah, that's not a problem at all, I don't think. I think wherever you were in the UK, there'd be a band within 10 or 20 miles that would welcome you to come and listen to a rehearsal.
Nice.
I have one last question, and it's about the recordings that those bands put out. Like, I'm imagining you have recorded. So how's like a recording session? How's the production of one of those CDs? Like, just the day off. Like, how do you guys record the band?
It's very old-fashioned in a way. It's great. There's a couple of very good companies, but World of Sound, who do the majority of the brass band recordings now. They're excellent people, and they've got all of the right equipment. And we just hire a decent venue acoustically, and we just record as a band, and 3-hour sessions. So a typical CD for us would be sometimes a Friday night, but more often than not, 2 sessions on a Saturday, 2 sessions on a Sunday, and that's the CD done. No matter what the content is, whether it's test pieces, whether it's concert repertoire, whatever.
So in other words, it has to be ready. Like,
yes.
You go and perform, and it's studio time. There's no room for practicing at that very moment.
No, it's got to be ready when you do it. I think every band, again, no matter what level, there's bands of all levels making recordings now, making CDs. They all do the same. They treat it a bit like a contest. They rehearse, get the stuff ready, then record and tidy up the recording, obviously. But no, there's no time for learning in the session. It's just pure performance.
Yeah, what's amazed me is the extremely high level of performance that you have with the band. It is crazy. I mean, it's the kind of go. Yeah,
and that, I think competition helps that, and the regularity of us playing together, and the concert music we play, and the direction from the conductor all helps. And I think every band, no matter what level they play at, can do a good performance of their chosen repertoire generally. So I think the brass band movement is very listenable, no matter what level the band is at. It's nice to go and listen to a concert,
It is any rule about don't getting to rehearsals? Is kind of you need to be at amount of rehearsal per year to keep playing in the band, or how it works that?
I think it's different. It depends on people's jobs and people's lives. If someone needs a bit of time off, they get a bit of time off. If someone, if a player arrives and says, I can only do this in advance, and the band decides to take them on, then that's how it is. But I think most people were pretty committed at the top level, especially. It's we all have to miss for work. I would, if there was a rehearsal tonight, I would have been missing it because I've been at my daughter's parents' evening at school. There are things, school concerts that I do. People have work shifts and can't come. So it's a very intense hobby, but at the end of the day, it is still a hobby. The performances are a bit better than a hobby, but at the end of the day, it's not our job.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. So, well, I must say, David, you have one more? I mean, I have thousand millions. I mean,
I
don't stop.
I have one more comment. It's like what strikes me about conversation with you, Andrew, is like how we're talking about music, but we're also talking about family and how life happens. Uh, so many times, whenever we talk about music, we like to romanticize the fact that music is at a higher level and nobody touches like the personal life. But talking with you about all of this juggling of time and commuting, like getting from one place to another, just speaks through my heart because that's exactly the situation. Like I mean, like I have to juggle between my family, the commutes, rehearsals, and I feel very identified, and I don't feel alone after talking to you. And the other thing is that I'm incredibly impressed about the amount of time you guys devote to these events. And so right now it's giving me like this understanding on why you guys sound the way you sound.
Mm.
It's not one section or one rehearsal every now and then and let's
No,
put it together. It's
it's
like
constant.
it's very intensive. And so today precisely I was looking like at an image on the internet about intensity, and it had like a flame that starts very high and then it starts diminishing, and that's not very effective. What I'm seeing here is like the same flame every single day,
Yeah.
achieving those goals. So I hope like people that are listening to this conversation are as inspired as I am right now. And I wanted to thank you about like first of all being here and putting this effort to be here and sharing with us all your experiences. I really appreciate it. So if Patricio has something to say, I
Well,
leave it up
I
to
will.
you.
I will just say. I want to say, Andy, first because the next time a player came to me and tell me I don't have time because I need to do something else, I'm going to send you the link of this episode for him to listen to Andy speak about Fodens. I mean, that's it. Very easy. Thank you very much, Andy, for that. It has been a huge pleasure, a very inspiring episode, and I hope many people go through this because I think music need more people with the passion you have for making music. And thank you very much for being here. For us, have been a huge privilege. I have a million questions more. We don't have the time, but probably in the future, and I hope not sooner than later, we are going to have you back.
Yeah, that's
And
fine.
we are going to talk more about all the different topics. So thank you very much. And if you have something else, microphone is yours.
Not really, no. But I think if you're a tuba player, if you can find a brass band to at least go and play in a couple of times, just go and have a look at the music and just see the difference it is to play that amount of notes every rehearsal, especially if you've never done it before.
Yes, I agree with
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who was on the other side. I need to also thank you, my friend Przemek Wojta, who put his living room for us to tonight. If you see, I have put my tuba, but he decorated with all his scotch and whiskey for all of us. So thank you, Przemek, one more time. Thank you for everyone. And we see you next week with episode 132, but this time in Spanish. Thank you and bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.